All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today as we launch our newest initiative, Mission from Mars Better Buildings, or what we'll also be referring to as our Better Buildings mission. My name is Andy Lamb. I'm Senior Manager of Climate Programs at MaRS, where I oversee our Mission from Mars program, which is a series of initiatives focused on accelerating the adoption of climate innovations. We have an exciting agenda in store for you today, which you'll see down on the left side of the screen. It includes two big announcements from our MaRS team and some great discussions with industry and academic experts. So quick logistics. So this entire event will be recorded and it'll be uploaded to our missionfrommars.ca website. There's also a live transcription option at the bottom, which you can toggle by clicking the button. The Q&A function is active. However, given we have a very tight agenda, we won't be able to do a formal Q&A during the event. But that said, if you have any questions for our team or for any of the panelists, feel free to still submit them via the Q&A and we'll respond either live through the Zoom function or we can follow up via email after. I'd like to take a moment to make sure we acknowledge that Toronto, where MaRS is physically located, are the ancestral homelands and waterways of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and are still home to many Indigenous peoples today. The Métis people of Toronto and New York regions have also settled their communities here. There's an incredibly deep understanding and stewardship of these lands by Indigenous communities who've essentially been practicing sustainable land management for a long time. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of decarbonizing the built environment. And it's important we recognize that the land that our modern day buildings and our infrastructure were constructed over these lands and the ongoing responsibility we have to reconciliation in our work. So I encourage you to have a look at the resources that we'll be sharing in the chat to learn more about the Indigenous communities that share the land that you work and live on. And for the real estate professionals on the call, where your assets are located. With that, let's get into our programming. We'll begin with some opening remarks from Allison Nankivell, the CEO of MaRS Discovery District. Allison, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. Really delighted to be here as part of this virtual webinar. It's really, really nice to see MaRS launching yet another climate program. So good morning to everybody who's joining us today for our Mission for MaRS Better Buildings. We really appreciate you joining for what we believe is going to be our most ambitious mission yet. We have a packed agenda for today's event, and it's all about how we can use innovation to make the places that we spend the majority of our lives, buildings, better. Since the first Mission for MaRS Climate Impact Challenge that launched in 2021, we've done a number of things, including assembled and working with a coalition of more than 100 industry participants who are helping to remove barriers to adoption for cleantech ventures that we support. We've made over 150 curated investor and customer introductions to the 20+ climate champions that have been built through this program. We're also helping participating ventures build momentum in the marketplace. For example, helping drone reforestation company Flash Forest land a major tree planting contract with our federal government. Flash Forest land a major tree planting contracts with, Flash Forest became also a key participant in many of our other programs, becoming the first Canadian charitable organization. As MaRS, we also purchased carbon credits from 5 carbon dioxide removal ventures. And in doing so, we sent a signal that action is needed to catalyze the market for these very important technologies, and that MaRS is willing to walk the walk and share learnings with others. And that's not all for MaRS Climate. The winner of our first Women in Climate cohort, Summit Nanotech, is now one of the top startups in Canada, raising currently a round of $150 million. MaRS Hubs is in this cohort too, and participating as a support, adopting peak power and other innovative Canadian solutions to reduce our buildings' carbon footprint, just to help with the heat waves like we've just recently had. And we're also proud to continually support over 240 Canadian cleantech startups that are driving climate action across the country. At MaRS, we really understand the challenges that small companies face as they seek to find customers and scale up their businesses. But we also understand the complexities of managing buildings and trying new things in the built environment. At the same time, the way we build and operate needs to change. Buildings and the construction sector are responsible for over a third of global greenhouse gas emissions. Innovation, and most importantly, innovation adoption, will be integral for getting us from where we are now to the buildings of the future. Technology is here to help us build with materials that are easier on the planet, use less materials in the first place, and reduce the amount of energy required to meet our needs. It's been fantastic to see the excitement around this initiative grow. The sentiment that we're hearing over and over again is that this industry is ready for change. People like yourselves in the audience are more knowledgeable than ever about decarbonization, its importance, but also its benefits, such as to your bottom line. And we are ready to champion that with you as organizations to come together as a community. MaRS is very excited to be part of a platform and to provide that community that we can bring this mission and make progress in building a much greener and cleaner environment. So thank you for being part of this mission. I'll turn it back now to Andy.
Awesome. Allison, thanks so much. For those that don't know, Allison had recently joined MaRS. I think this is now her third month, and really appreciate Allison jumping into our climate work and rolling up her sleeves. So Allison, thank you. So we'll now introduce Mission from MaRS for those who aren't familiar. Whenever we talk about Mission from MaRS, we always like to start with this statement. Canada excels when it comes to developing research and innovation. Our company always tops global lists. In the recent cleantech 100 list, we had 13 Canadian companies featured. We have great universities, great labs, lots of government grants for R&D. But where we lag is when it comes to adoption. There's a risk aversion and lack of appetite in Canada when it comes to new innovative solutions, which leads to long sales cycles and results in a lot of our innovators and cleantech companies selling and moving abroad. So this adoption gap inspired Mission from MaRS. So Mission from MaRS is a program focused on helping accelerate the commercialization and adoption of Canadian climate and cleantech innovations. Essentially, we launched these big missions that focus on key themes or sectors. In this case, the real estate sector, to see how we can work together with the ecosystem to help overcome challenges and barriers that innovators and technology developers face when they're trying to sell to their markets. And on the flip side, we're supporting industry and government to help them overcome their barriers so that they can procure and be users of these technologies to meet their own goals, whether these are climate targets or economic goals. And when we talk about barriers, these barriers can include things like complexities around procurement, capital costs, perceived risks because of early and new technologies, policy risks, to name a few. So each of our mission includes activities that will mobilize and bring together industry leaders. MaRS' big role in the ecosystem is that we're a convener. So we want to bring together essentially all the folks around that circle on the right. This includes customers and end users, governments, whether they're policymakers or regulators, academia, investors, supply chain members, and importantly, the clean tech ventures. Pretty much everyone in the ecosystem that would be relevant. Systems change can be difficult, and we know the adoption of new things can take a really long time, which is why we need everyone at the table. Another key objective for our mission and activity is enabling the growth of the highest potential climate technologies. So essentially the work that we do supporting startups and ventures. We work directly with entrepreneurs to help them develop these game-changing innovations to grow their businesses. We want to work with policymakers and regulators and all levels of government to create an environment that's conducive of growth and innovation. And ultimately, the overarching objective for Mission from MaRS is to facilitate the adoption of climate innovation. So being that bridge between the supply, which are those that develop these technologies, and demand, those could buy and use them. And so with that introduction to our missions, we're excited to announce that today we are launching our newest mission, Better Buildings. So our Better Buildings mission is focused on leveraging cleantech innovation, particularly the Canadian cleantech innovation, to decarbonize the built environment. And we want to do this on a really big scale. The buildings and construction sector is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, accounting for staggering 37% of global emissions. This encompasses the entire life cycle and includes both embodied and operational emissions. And both are important in our context. The embodied emissions include the entire construction process, from the production of materials like cement, steel, aluminum for buildings, through to transporting those materials to the site, and then also includes the construction of the building. And then there's operational emissions, which, as the name suggests, are emissions that come from the day-to-day activities that go into operating a building when you move in to live and work in it. So that include things like heating and cooling, which in Canada can be quite volatile. You know, we have cold winters, but then our summers can get hot, like it was last week. So heating, cooling, and then also lighting. So between embodied and operational emissions, buildings are large generators of emissions, but they're also needed. I can bet that many of you are probably currently dialing in from a building right now. So we work and live in buildings, and we will continue to do so for a while. And right now, you know, many people believe that we're in a housing crisis here in Canada, and that means that we'll need to build more homes. And this will lead to a lot more potential emissions. So ideally, if we can scale up the right solutions, that can limit and reduce the amount of emissions that go into building those new homes. And that's what our Better Buildings mission hopes to do. So this is a little bit on the why we're doing this. So in terms of the mission objectives, so this mission is meant to be a 5-year initiative where MaRS can essentially triple down within the space, commit resources to. We have a team behind it. And we want to spend the next 5 years doing a bunch of things that will map back to at least one of these 3 objectives. Firstly, we want to reduce operational emissions of existing buildings. There's a lot of buildings out there. Like I said, you're probably in one. And maybe we can optimize that building and reduce the current footprint. Secondly, we want to lower the embodied carbon content of new buildings. So there's going to be a lot of building to happen, specifically in the residential sector, and we want to make sure that it's as low carbon as possible. And finally, seeing how we can leverage clean tech to support other important goals within the real estate sector, including climate adaptation resiliency, because let's face it, climate change is here. It's already happening. But then also seeing how clean tech can help reduce costs and support affordability. So these are our 3 objectives, and later on we'll announce our first project to help address some of these. There are a lot of solutions out there, and you know they already exist and can help us do any of these 3 things. We just need to get them into the markets and scale them up. Great, so I'm delighted to welcome Luke Gilligan, Board Director at the Peter Gilligan Foundation and Director of Programs at the Gilligan Family Office. The Peter Gilligan Foundation has been a generous donor to Mission for MaRS since our very first mission back in 2021. Luke and his team have, over the years, provided invaluable support, encouragement, and good counsel and advice. Luke also sits on our Climate Innovation Board, which helps shape and guide the work that our climate team at MaRS does. So Luke, thank you for all your support, and I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Andy. It's an exciting day. I'm glad to be with you all, and thank everyone for joining on this exciting announcement day. As Andy mentioned, in addition to working inside the Gilligan Family Office, I sit on the board of both Mattamy Homes and Peter Gilligan Foundation. Peter Gilligan Foundation's mission is to improve the lives of children and families by empowering initiatives that help the world transition to a more healthy, prosperous, and sustainable future. In addition to our fairly well-known work in the healthcare space, we also run a variety of grant-making programs, including some focused on children, youth, and families, Indigenous youth, international development, and increasingly climate change. Everybody on this call sees and feels the increasing effects of climate change every single day. We know what's causing it, and we know what needs to be done. One of those things that needs to be done is to drastically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions as a result of construction, which accounts for over half the emissions in an urban environment like Toronto. As Andy mentioned, we also know we are in a housing crisis, and our energy demands are set to grow across the country. To address this in the real estate industry, we can get more efficient and intelligent about how we heat, cool, and light our buildings. We can be more mindful of the emissions associated with the products we use to construct those buildings, and we can make smarter decisions about the emissions as a result of the design process all the way through to the end of the building's life cycle. Because of the variety of roles that I'm fortunate enough to occupy, I sit at an interesting intersection. In the world of nonprofits, I often encounter small charities, startups, small businesses with new innovative solutions that can help us address this challenge. All they need is the support and funding to help them reach speed and scale. In the construction industry, I see an industry that is ready to do their part to help address climate change. All they need is for those solutions to be at speed and scale. And that's why we really love this MaRS Better Buildings mission. We are supporting them with a $2.25 million grant over 5 years. And we know that money will go a long way to help find and incubate these amazing innovations that will help address this urgent challenge. We look forward to working together with MaRS to help Canadian clean tech reach its full potential in our cities, buildings, and country. That's it from me. Back to you, Andy.
Awesome, Luke. Thanks so much, and we look forward to continuing the journey with you and your team as well. And like climate change is here. It has been really hot. Hopefully, everyone made it through last week okay in the heat dome. I guess to quote a famous line from a song from the early 20s or 2000s, it's getting hot in here, which is why I'm excited to announce the next discussion, which is not a fireside chat. I think that might be a little warm for this weather. We're going to be doing a lakeside chat. So I'll introduce the moderator, Tyler Hamilton, Senior Director of Climate at MaRS. Tyler oversees pretty much all of the climate activities that we do here at MaRS. Over to you, Ty.
Thanks, Andy. I don't know if you know the second line of that song lyric, but it's take off all your clothes. So I don't know if we want to get that far, but good reference nonetheless. I'd really like to echo your comments and take the opportunity to thank Luke and the Peter Gilligan Foundation for its generous support of this much needed mission. Driving impact in the area of building emissions is tremendously important, and we're really eager to get to work on this. Moving things along, first, I also wanted to point out that the Gilligan Foundation, Peter Gilligan Foundation, hasn't just supported this mission, but they've been supporting Mission from Mars from the very beginning. And actually, I took off my Oilers shirt, sadly, and I put on our Mission from Mars t-shirt today. You can't see it when I sit down, but I just figured I would represent our entire effort here today. Okay, let's move on. I'd like to introduce our Lakeside Chat for a discussion on the importance of building decarbonization from both an operational and an embodied carbon perspective, but also just as important, the role that innovation plays within that. So with that, please welcome Randall Frobelius, Project Executive with the MaRS Hubs team, and also former chair of BOMA International. Also, please welcome Shoshana Sachs, Associate Professor in the Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering at the University of Toronto, and Canada Research Chair in Sustainable Infrastructure at U of T. Welcome both. Thanks for joining.
Good morning.
Great. Okay, so let's jump in. We have a pretty broad range of backgrounds and experiences in the audience. So let's make sure everyone here is on the same page. Shoshana, please tell us a bit about your work at U of T, why decarbonizing the built environment is so important, what's really at stake here. But as part of that answer, could you differentiate between embodied and operational carbon?
Happy to. Let me see if I can remember to do all of those things in one answer. So I'm a professor in civil and mineral engineering, and I research how we should get from here, the built world that we have, to there, the built world that we want, where we live sustainably, we have the services we need, but they're more in balance with the carrying capacity of the planet. And within that, I do lots of work about how should we build and what should we build it, with a particular focus on things that we can do already and in the next sort of 10 to 20 years to make things much, much better than they are right now. So very focused on rapid deployment of making things better. a lot of my work has to do with embodied carbon, which is about the upstream processes of making buildings. So every time you use a piece of material, be it for buildings or for anything else, that material had to be manufactured. So if we're talking about buildings, if you're using steel, you had to mine iron ore out of the ground. Then you had to take that to a plant and have a whole bunch of energy put into it so the iron could be converted into steel. Every time you put energy into the process, it has some kind of background GHG emission. So if you're burning fossil fuels in some way, there were emissions involved, which we're usually doing in mining, we're often doing in manufacturing. And then also for lots of the things we make buildings out of, like concrete and steel, there's also what we call process emissions. So there's a chemical process that takes place as you, for instance, turn limestone into cement that reduces more emissions. The material emissions of construction at a global scale now account for, we think, about 15% of all GHG emissions every year. And that number is just going up as we have more people on the planet who are consuming more stuff. Operational emissions are then everything that you put into running the building. So you keep the lights on, you need it to be heated, you need it to be cooled, you need energy for cooking or for running your computers. And all of that requires, again, more energy inputs. And so the emissions associated either with directly burning fossil fuels on site, so like if you have a boiler to be able to run and operate your buildings, or the upstream GHG emissions of, for instance, the electricity that you buy. And then there's things like maintenance, which tend to be sort of between embodied and operational, but that's the general gist.
Terrific. Terrific. So how, like going on the embodied side, how difficult is it to track everything within the process? Because you talked about a lot of steps there. It sounds really complicated. Have you been able to crack that nut?
We have to track two pieces of information. One, how much stuff do you use? So how much wood, insulation, steel, concrete did you put into the thing you built? And then you also have to track what is the environmental intensity of the thing that you used. So how much upstream emissions was associated with that chunk of wood or that kilogram of concrete. We do those in two different ways. For what is the environmental intensity, how much pollution is associated with manufacturing, there are international standards, and we produce things now called environmental product declarations, which more and more material manufacturers are using. And if you're buying materials, you should definitely be asking for. And then within how much stuff do we use, we track that in a bunch of different ways. We already, on the things we do quantity takeoffs for costing. You can need to do them a little bit differently for materials, but you can get a sense of how many materials you use. You can track how much materials was delivered to your site, which in theory is something we should be tracking already. In my research, because actually people don't do either of those as accurately as we need, we build very detailed BIM models, BIMs from people's drawings, and then do quantity takeoffs from that. But we know that that's the lower bound of materials because you always buy more, have more delivered in site than actually ends up in the building itself.
Interesting. So thanks for doing that work, by the way. It's a very important work. I'm going to move over to Randall. We've been lucky to have you working with MaRS for, boy, 20 years now, Randall. How has the industry changed the way it thinks about decarbonization, particularly like over that period, but particularly in the past few years?
First of all, thanks for having me, Tyler, and thanks to the Gilligan Foundation as well. This is a great program, and we're thrilled to participate. How's the journey changed? You know, in 2005, when we first opened, I think sustainability to us meant, you know, connecting to district energy, some lighting retrofits, some, you know, variable speed drives, that kind of thing. And, you know, since then, obviously we've started to learn that burning fossil fuels to produce that district energy on the steam side is a source of CO2 that we've been trying to mitigate. But then in about 2020, we start to realize that about 90% of our carbon generated from a building like MaRS connected to district energy is generated from that steam that's, you know, remote. So 20 years ago, we thought, you know, this is the bee's knees. We're doing the right thing. 20 years later, we're starting to have to take real action to mitigate against that district energy, natural gas burning to produce the steam. So a building like MaRS has a great deal of life sciences spaces, which requires additional air handling, much higher rate of air changes for the lab spaces. With all of those air changes, we're bringing in, humid, hot outdoor air in the summer and chilled, cold air in the winter. And so all of that just adds the extra energy to it. And so requiring even more from that district energy system. So that's really where we are. I think the other changes are both our tenants and our owners of the building, the MaRS Discovery District, are expecting us to act. And so, MaRS is a commercial real estate operation. We rent spaces to tenants. Tenants are asking, what are you doing? Much like they're asking many landlords across the country, what are you doing to mitigate carbon output? And so, we've got stakeholders on the tenancy side, stakeholders on the ownership side, and then you've also got the investment community, i.e. financing agencies or financing groups that are helping us fund the building, asking the same kind of questions. So it's an entirely different landscape.
Can you talk to some of the things that MaRS has done itself over the years to reduce our footprint? I know of a couple, but and also to give people a sense of scale too, right? It should be said that the MaRS Center downtown is 1.5 million square feet, so it's quite a large footprint. Maybe comment on a few of the things we've done.
Yeah, I think the lowest hanging fruit would be lighting retrofits, lighting control systems, that type of thing. But again, that's pretty generic stuff that most landlords if they haven't completed it yet, they've done. One of the most innovative things that we've done at MaRS, I think, is the Airgenuity system. So I just referenced the fact that we have to increase our air exchanges or air changes per hour because of the life sciences spaces. And there's a technology called Airgenuity or Aircuity, where instead of running the systems consistently at 10 air changes an hour, you sample the air that's leaving the exhaust stream. And if the exhaust stream sensors pick up harmful compounds or material, then it will ramp up the air handling. If it detects that the air coming out of the hoods, et cetera, is clean, it'll ramp that back. So that is a significant amount of reduction potential. So we've implemented that on a number of our spaces. We have a ways to go, but we'd like to roll that out across others. Alison Ankevel in her opening remarks referenced peak power. We are hopefully going to be online next summer for our first connected battery, which is going to be 1.5 megawatts. And what that will allow us to do is to take our load on peak days. MaRS has a very big load, so in the high megawatts, 8, 10, but it will still provide us a platform to shed some of that load over to the batteries and reduce our exposure to the GSA global adjustments that IESO administers. So we're doing two things. One, we are going to save money and pay for the batteries through peak power, but we're also reducing our electrical consumption. So.
Terrific. And then there's obviously other things we've done, like monitoring more granularly with circuit meter.
Yes. Yeah. Circuit meter has been a good partner. In fact, we use them as part of our lighting retrofit programs. So to help us benchmark before and after, they have a very easy to install system. It's very reasonably priced as well. And so we've used that technology as well to do that. So we do like to champion and provide MaRS as a bit of a sandbox, as long as it doesn't do anything detrimental. But for sure, we like to use companies that come out of our ecosystem to use the platform for demonstration purposes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we plan to do much more of that through your participation in this mission. So thank you again for joining it. Shoshana, so you and your team are working on a project called Building More with Less, Embody GHGs and the Housing Infrastructure Deficit. I know you've covered a little bit of the embodied carbon stuff, but can you share a little bit about this specific project and what motivated it?
So this project was driven by realizing that we were in tension with two things that we had promised to do, and not just Canada. This is a promise we see more and more around the world. So on one hand, we had promised to dramatically ramp up our housing construction and supporting infrastructure. So we're going to build more than we ever had before. And we're talking about building 3.6 times more a year than we have built historically. So there's really dramatic increase in the amount of construction we're talking about. And that's widely viewed now as a universal good. We need it for social reasons. We need it for economic reasons. We need it for basic stability in our country, right? We need to build a massive amount more of everything. So that's on the one hand, more. On the other hand, we've committed to reductions in GHG emissions of 40 to 45% by 2030 across the whole economy. That is not that many years from now, and we still have most of the work to do. And so we have to do less polluting in every aspect of the economy. Construction is about 1/10 of the GHG emissions at 2018 rates, but if we quadruple it, now it's about 40% of the GHG emissions of the country. So at the same time that GHG emissions are coming down by nearly half, we're talking about building 4 times as much stuff. How is that possible? And so starting a couple of years ago, put together a consortium of 12 industry partners, and we got supporting funding from the federal government and a couple groups at the University of Toronto, like the School of Cities. And we were like, okay, well, how can we do this? Can we understand what the ceiling is? Like how much GHG budget we have? Can we understand what the floor is? And can we see any pathway in between? And we're now a couple of years into the research, and good news, does look like there's a pathway in between. Bad news, it requires dramatic change in what we build and how we build it.
But we have, and you mentioned this in our previous discussions, we have technologies that exist today to get us there. We're just not scaling it at the rate that's necessary.
Yeah, so about 70% of the gap can be taken care of by things that we already know how to do. So what types of buildings we build. So we historically have predominantly built only single family homes, and also how well we design the homes. And so both of those questions can be questions of, just practice, but they can also be questions of invention and technology, right? How do we create companies who know how and do at scale build the right kinds of buildings in the right kinds of neighborhoods, and how can they do it in a way that it's affordable and they can make money, so that and how can they do it fast so that we rapidly transition? So that gets us 2/3 of the way. The other approximate third is a mix of better manufacturing of materials. So we need to change the way in which we manufacture steel, the way we manufacture concrete, the ways in which we manufacture wood and insulation, and all of those will require scaling up of technology. And then we also need to get better at using the resources we already have. So how do we reuse existing buildings to deliver more function as opposed to just tearing them down? And so those are the 3 pathways. If we can double reuse, improve our materials by 25%, limit design to only the top 25% now, so cut off the worst 3/4 of the buildings we build, and move to multi-unit neighborhoods, we can build 5.8 million homes without destroying the planet.
Okay, rapid fire. Wood, steel, cement. Which one do you like the most, and what has the most potential for emission reductions? Quick.
I'm material agnostic. You can build good buildings with all of them. And I think that we need to be less focused on materials and more focused on how we use them.
Yeah, good answer. Randall, so Shoshana mentioned that we have most of the technologies we need from an operational perspective as well, again, in previous discussions. But with incentives and penalties like the carbon tax in play, why isn't industry moving faster to get to net zero in your view?
I'd say we are moving quickly. We have some great Canadian leadership in decarbonization and in Canadian real estate ownership, especially commercially, with the pension funds. They and their managers do get it, and I think that a lot of the institutional managers that I engage with and that I share ideas with. I think they are on a track. Now, that being said, they're well funded. They have high expectations on progress. I have a friend at Quadreal who shared with me some data on the Post building, which they just opened in Vancouver. They saved the entire podium. Shoshana, you might have seen this project as well. 25,000 tons, I think, is their advertised carbon savings. And so, not only did it speed up the construction process, but it saved a great deal of money, and it saved a heritage building as well, right? So it's a win-win-win. So I think that said, that there is some great progress being made, but I will be very cautious how I say this, because I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers, but I'm not sure that our current carbon tax regime is effective at either highlighting to consumers their impact on CO2 production, or are the funds generated by the tax getting into the right hands to help us do things, invest in, early stage companies, scale the early stage companies. So, in March of this year, MaRS, for our 1.5 million square feet, we paid over $75,000 in the month of March as carbon tax. And, so we're in the $1 million a year range. And, I'm not sure that everybody knows where that money goes. Is it meant to fund other programs, conservation measures, or is it going back to Canadians in a $140 a month payment? So I think that has to be dissected a little bit more, and maybe it's a marketing and communications exercise. I'm not sure, but I am encouraged by Mission from Mars and the companies that are going to be coming out of the program, the companies that have historically come out of the program. But I think definitely we have to relook at how that funding is getting spent on and directed.
How about you, Shoshana? Got any thoughts on why we're not moving faster as an industry?
I think we're a fundamentally conservative industry that wants to do things the way we did them the last time. And it's, the easiest, safest, fastest way is to do the thing we already know how to do. And so we are very strongly disincentivized. One of my working theories is that we are penny wise and pound foolish. So we push very hard for design fees to be low, and then we pay for them later. So I was sitting with a representative of a big group of owners recently, doing some back of the envelope calculations about how much money and materials and GHG we could save if we just let architects and engineers design better. And we came up with, I think conservatively, probably 10% in the cost of construction. And that's my conservative professional opinion, that we are just leaving huge amounts of money on the table because we're rushing through design and are just defaulting to things we already built. Before I was an academic, I used to be a geotechnical engineer designing subway piles. And the piles that we built were about $65,000 a pile. I was making about $65,000 a year at the time. And I knew we were putting too many piles in the ground. And I knew that just a little bit of time, even though I was 1.5 years into my career, I could save piles. And I badly wanted to go to our client at the time and say, give me the weekend, I'll work for free. I'll save you 6 piles. We'll split the difference, right? Win-win for me. I didn't do it because I was 24 and I didn't want to get fired. But there are opportunities to be much more materially efficient. There are opportunities to design better, and we are skipping them. And it's not saving us any money, and it's certainly not helping us help the environment.
Well, that's the kind of thinking we need, though. So we appreciate.
I would add, though, one of the other reasons, and I think Shoshana's hit on it in a way here too, in that, our business, the property management side of things and the asset management side of things is under incredible pressure right now from an occupancy perspective. Still some of the lagging issues coming out of COVID. There's a lot of pressures financially on companies to focus on ways to maintain occupancy, reduce expenses. And so, there's a lot to balance right now, and couple that with education and providing or finding staff that can tackle these kinds of projects as well is a challenge. And I agree 100% on the design side of things, in that we do tend to go out and ask for 2 or 3 design proposals. You know, someone is 15% less. We try and take that project. The engineers and architects themselves, you can tell, are also balancing a lot right now. And sometimes we have to stop, take a deep breath, and look at how we can really make this project better. And sometimes I don't think we provide ourselves with the luxury of doing that.
So we're at time. That said, I'm just going to squeeze another minute out of this conversation because I wanted to ask you. So in the audience, we have founders of innovative decarbonization tech companies. We've got property managers, developers, utilities, government agencies, and more. What actions can industry professionals take? What actions can the audience take to support and accelerate these innovations for a more sustainable future? Maybe like keep it to a nice, succinct answer. Shoshana?
I mean, my first thought is to just start, just do the thing, build something. The number one thing people are going to want to see is that it's been built and that it's been done before, and that is the single biggest hurdle. Nobody wants to be the first one to build in a new way. You need to demonstrate that it's safe. So I would say if you're a funder, that's a really important accelerating space. You know, get people their first real example. You know, if you have something that, you know, that's the key inflection moment, make sure it gets delivered into something new. We really have to focus on transitioning from things being good on paper to good in practice. And if it turns out, if we build it and it turns out actually it wasn't such a good idea, at least we know that and can move on to the next thing.
Okay, good thought. Randall?
We got 5 things. I'll make it quick though. Keep it high on the agenda, much like Shoshana just said. You know, don't keep this in your scope of work for projects. Don't take your foot off the gas on with respect to improvements that you know you can incorporate into a project and make a difference. It's commercial budget season right now for buildings, and so, you know, keep monies aside, and tenants will support that. There's also still a lot to do on the efficiency side of things. So running buildings efficiently. There's a lot of tools out there. There's still a lot of incentives out there. Make sure you know what they are and take advantage of them so that you can have an impact. Train staff. So let's keep pushing staff to run with an efficiency and low carbon mindset. Take courses. There's organizations like BOMI that offer a lot of really good programs in that regard. BOMA Best is another way that you can run a building and really look at efficiency and improve things. And then I would just say, if we all get involved with this dialogue and, you know, share what hurdles that we're facing, we all have a lot to share, and the exchange of ideas is really important because there's a lot of things out there that as a group we can solve more effectively.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks to both of you. This was a terrific and insightful conversation, and we're delighted to have you both part of this mission. Sorry, Ria, for taking 2 or 3 minutes more than I was supposed to, but I'm going to pass the baton over to you, and Ria's going to walk us through today's announcement details. Ria?
Great. Thanks so much, Tyler. And thank you again, Randall and Shoshana, for sharing those insights. I'll be definitely keeping those 5 things in mind, Randall, and I love the phrase transitioning from things being good on paper to good in practice. That carries a lot and speaks a lot to what we're talking about today. So my name is Ria Perot. I'm the Better Buildings mission lead on MaRS's climate team. And as we heard, there are a lot of challenges and barriers to adopting the technologies that can make a real dent in decarbonizing the built environment from both an operational and embodied carbon perspective. And we know that there are some fantastic Canadian innovators that are working on solving the challenge of building decarbonization and sustainability. Many of these are in the MaRS portfolio already, but many more are not. And that's why I'm so excited to announce this mission's anchor project, the Better Buildings Adoption Accelerator, made possible by the Peter Gilligan Foundation. This program will work with both ventures and industry to drive the adoption of building decarbonization technologies, support pilots and commercial deployments, and seek out pathways to reaching commercial scale. We'll be recruiting 6 commercialization-ready ventures from across Canada and support their path to widespread adoption, enabling them and adopters to reach their decarbonization potential. So here's a bit about what we heard. This isn't just a venture program. A key component of the Adoption Accelerator will be working with industry leaders, and the work on this has already begun. In designing this program, we convened 2 workshops with representatives from 15 organizations that represent a fairly sustainability-minded cross-section of industry. Some of the logos of the real estate owners, operators, and developers that participated in these workshops are on the screen now. Thank you again to those people, and we met with many more to hear about their biggest decarbonization challenges. And thank you to those folks as well for sharing their insights on what those challenges are and also where innovative ideas could plug in to help. So in those conversations, we learned that uptake, inertia, and risk were some of the key challenges that came out of those conversations. In terms of uptake, we're not using a lot of the existing solutions that we have to lower carbon in buildings. And for industries and manufacturers that do make that shift, there's challenges with tracking and understanding the data on the performance of new solutions. There's a lot that goes into change, even small change, and it's easier to keep following the same path that's been followed before. And that's this idea of inertia, it being easier to just do the pre-existing processes, and it's harder to shift to different ways of doing things. And then, of course, there's always the bottom line, having a quantifiable return on investment, which can be difficult for things like material with lower embodied carbon, which is more expensive upfront, but doesn't lead to lower costs later on. How do you justify that? So there are different challenges, obviously, for different types of technologies, whether they reduce operational or embodied carbon. So what we really wanted to know was what would make it worth it. What types of technologies and solutions would it be worth overcoming barriers for, and what challenges could be overcome using innovative ideas? Here's what we heard on the technology types of interest on the embodied carbon side. Some of them were like-for-like material replacements, more widespread use of low carbon and even carbon negative building products, and technologies that could enable a cleaner and more efficient construction process. For operational carbon, we discussed advanced mechanical systems, including humidification management or electrification of heating and cooling systems, technologies for passive energy efficiency improvements, including improved building envelopes and cladding, and utility load shifting and management systems, as well as the software to support reducing demand. And what you see on the screen here is not a comprehensive list, but it gives an idea of what we heard and what we are going to be looking for. Our hope is that by hearing from industry first, we'll be able to support the growth of companies that have technologies with not only high technical decarbonization potential, but high adoption potential as well. As we launch this accelerator, here are some of the key activities. The 6 selected ventures will receive access to mentor networks, market intelligence, capital, talent, and communication services through MaRS, a curriculum of workshops designed to help prepare for commercial success, shaped by your needs as a company and the cohort's needs as a whole. We are looking for more mature companies in this, so we'll be catering to that. And then elevated and branding profile opportunities and media exposure. But beyond the typical accelerator offerings, we'll also be doubling down on supporting deployment wherever we can. So this includes curated support and introductions with potential adopters. We want to connect ventures to potential customers and end users. And in this way, we'll also be doing capacity support on seeking out pilots or commercial deployment projects and non-dilutive funding opportunities. So to kick things off, in addition to the benefits just listed, selected ventures will also receive access to a grant of up to $10,000 to be used for commercial deployment projects. So if you have a sustainable building technology venture that could fit in, we want to hear from you. Today, we are opening our national call for applications to the Better Buildings Adoption Accelerator. We're looking for companies with technologies that meet the needs described earlier, but we also know that innovation doesn't always fit in a box. And we're looking to support high potential sustainable buildings technologies across the board. So we're open to engaging with and receiving applications from eligible companies that don't immediately seem to fit the mold necessarily technology-wise. But eligibility criteria include being Canada-based, owning your IP, and having a technology readiness level of 6 to 9. Details will be available on our website. You can apply today at missionformars.ca/Better Buildings Adoption Accelerator, or register to join our applicant webinar on July 18th. The links to both are in the chat now. Applications close August 12th. And we also want to hear from potential adopters. Like I said, we want to match up our ventures with organizations that have an appetite for decarbonization through innovation. Tests and pilot projects are important, but we hope that these deployments, if they go well, will lead to adoption at scale. So if that sounds like if that sounds like something you're interested in, please reach out to us at mfm@marsdd.com. This is also in the chat, and we look forward to hearing from you. And we actually have some of the people that we heard from here today. We'll be talking about the impact and importance of decarbonizing from the perspective of industry, as well as some of the progress and challenges. So I'm very excited to be moderating this next panel, and I ask you to join me in welcoming Ali Haas, Chief Sustainability Officer at TrioVest, Jolene McLaughlin, Vice President of Climate and Sustainability at Ellis Don, Mariga, Vice President of Housing Growth, Development, and Asset Sustainability at Wood Green, and Phil Santana, Director of Sustainability at Mattamy Homes. So if we've got everyone on the line, great. Let's kick it off with a round of introductions. So starting with Ali, could you please give us a quick 30-second intro of what you and your organization do?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ria. This is fantastic. It's an exciting event. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So I'm leading sustainability, innovation, technology integration for TrioVest for a portfolio of about $12 billion in property management and $3 billion in development. We are a privately owned company operating in Canada. I'm a professional engineer by training. I'm an engineering scientist specialized in energy system optimization and modeling. That's for me.
Thanks. Jolene, over to you.
Thanks, Ria. It's really exciting to have the announcement out and live. So Jolene McLaughlin, I'm the Vice President of Climate and Sustainability for Ellis Don Corporation. We're known as one of the biggest general contractors in the country, but we've diversified our efforts to be a full building services provider. So we also have the biggest FM portfolio for hospitals in Canada. We have a really deep energy and digital services team that can help with aligning all of the technologies and innovations in the operations side. And we have a deep construction sciences and logistics team that helps us build out our carbon reduction targets for the process of building as well.
Great. Thank you. Mariga, you're up next. And we have you muted at the moment, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
My name is Mariga. I'm Vice President for Housing, Growth, Development, and Asset Sustainability. Wood Green is one of the larger community-based housing providers in the province. We currently have a building portfolio of about 1,500 units. We have a growth strategy to go up to 5,000 units in the next within the next decade, or within this coming decade, and a key part of our, one of the things that really works for us in being part of the Better Building Adoption and Accelerator program is just we have a very aging portfolio, and we want to be able to renew that portfolio in the spirit of decarbonization and greener, better, more comfortable building for our tenants, as well as part of our growth strategy to make sure that we address some of those issues of the embedded carbon, as well as creating new next generation types of buildings. So very excited to be part of this movement. Yeah.
Very excited to have you. And last intro for Phil.
Thanks, Ria, and thanks for having me on the panel. Very excited to be here. My name is Phil Santana, Director of Sustainability for Mattamy Homes Canada. Mattamy Homes is Canada's largest home builder, and we are North America's largest privately owned home builder. So we do build in the United States as well. In Canada, we're primarily in the Greater Toronto Area, Ottawa, and then Calgary and Edmonton. We see ourselves playing a role in the decarbonization of our industry because we find ourselves at the intersection of a lot of these conversations with our entire ecosystem, whether it's the public side or the private side. And we also are mindful that our industry is represented by a fairly significant conglomerate of companies, and perhaps some of them are not in a position to start decarbonizing today, but as our industry and government put eyes towards the future, we want to make sure that we're able to create a space for other builders like ourselves to be able to hopefully succeed in their decarbonization journey in the future.
Thanks. And thank you again to all four of you for being here. So let's just jump into it. Mariga, you started to hint at this a little bit, I think, in your intro, but could you please speak a little bit to the importance of building decarbonization for Wood Green's portfolio?
Yeah, so just like I said earlier, we house the most vulnerable population. We're a social housing provider, and our buildings, most of our buildings were in over 25 years. One of our other buildings that I'll speak about is over 50 years old. And so making sure that the buildings are fit for purpose is extremely important. Making sure that as we address that problem, we're also able to create better comfort and that there's something in it for our clients. So on that account, we started off 5 years ago. We started up our phase 1 of the journey to decarbonization with a $3.1 million investment-ready building retrofit program that covered at least half of our portfolio at that point, which is about 8 buildings. And what we learned from that process is obviously the 3 outcomes of making sure that we engage tenants and created a new level of comfort for them so that there's something in it for them. But we also learned to monetize the energy savings and allow us to feel comfortable that we could actually refinance the renewal, the retrofit parts of our building in addition to the financing. So based on that, a year ago, we launched phase 2 of our decarbonization journey. This involves a 160-unit building at Logan 444. And the whole purpose of that building is to achieve net zero retrofit in a number of ways. One, through building envelope, redoing the building envelope using panelized building technology, as well as building systems and the ventilation, again, to make sure that the comfort of the tenant is key. Once we achieve that level of efficiency, we believe it'll be able to anchor a fuel switch from gas to electricity without impacting our OPEX. And it's extremely important not to impact our OPEX because we're an affordable housing provider. And so those rents need to remain affordable. And then finally, we need to figure out ways to add more renewable sources in order to offset external process, what Shoshana called process emissions from either gas-fired Ontario electricity or other sources, dirty sources of energy. All that said, like I said, with a focus on integrating the quality of life improvements that need to be part of that journey, including creating a new seniors services hub and really creating both an organic and a mechanical change to the building environment. Yeah, so that's the journey we're at. Yeah.
And it sounds like a long journey that's been underway for a long time, and lots still to do, I'm sure. Yeah, and I want to bring Phil into this conversation too, because it's kind of coming at it from a different angle. So when it comes to decarbonization, what is Canada's largest home builder doing? Where are you coming from, and where's Mattamy going?
Yeah, so being mindful of time, I'll try and give you a recap of a pretty extensive strategy we've been trying to work on. Unlike Mariga, like our portfolio is handed over to homeowners, so we don't have long-term assets. So our business model is a little bit different to try to solve. And so, like any good journey, we started with data analysis. We don't know where to go if you don't know where you're starting at. So we did carbon calculations for our typical built form Part 3 and Part 9 buildings. And that enabled us to start actually building out our strategic roadmap, both from an operational and an embodied carbon perspective. Naturally, the operational carbon strategy was a little bit easier because we already had an energy efficiency strategy in-house. And so it was really pivoting that to an operational lens and realizing that, you can be really energy efficient, but that might not mean carbon efficient. So now trying to figure out how do we electrify and how do we do that successfully in the long term is where we've moved that plan. And then on the embodied carbon, we're starting to kind of build out, a hierarchy of decisions, and it leans into what Shoshana was mentioning around, just better design, using less material is kind of the first step and the easiest step per se, because paper exercises are easier than field exercises. And then beyond better design, just waste less. Obviously, materials, you don't want to create them and then put them to landfill. So using and wasting less is priority. Then the like for like that you mentioned in this mission, right? Like we want to be able to transition to lower carbon materials that are similar to current materials we use. We are very mindful of the ecosystem, the supply chain, the trades we use, and we don't want to disrupt that significantly right now as we start on our transition to lower carbon materials. So like for like is a win. And then ultimately it will be finding those more innovative materials that might disrupt our business practice, but being mindful of how it disrupts our business and how we can get ahead of it will be the next challenge.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, definitely have heard that in a lot of conversations that we've had, both, in those workshops I was mentioning, but then also just in those one-to-one conversations with different folks across the industry. And yeah, I think a lot about the challenges to adopting innovative materials that might end up being those disruptors, so to speak. So Jolene, I want to talk a little bit more about those challenges. So what makes it so difficult to adopt innovative solutions or even non-innovative solutions for the built environment?
Yeah, so I think both Shoshana mentioned it earlier, and then you mentioned it in your lead up. There's a sense of complacency and unwillingness to change. The reality of construction and buildings is that they are risky, and there's significant awards tied to making sure that we manage that risk really well. We can't afford to have buildings fall or any of that sort of stuff. That's not even part of the consideration. And so trying to change something that we've been using for 100+ years, it creates a sense of fear. And realistically, we just have to rethink how we're prioritizing some of these decisions. We often make choices based on cost and schedule implications. And so how do we start to bring carbon into that conversation too, so that it becomes a more robust conversation and starts to focus on the climate priority that we have? We know in the market that there are solutions that work, I think that was mentioned already, that support both decarbonization of materials, but also of the operating of buildings. And there's a resistance to putting them in place. And so it's really engaging in conversation to bring it up, to think about it differently, to get everybody to focus in a different way. And hopefully that helps to desensitize some of the risk that we're feeling and some of the fear that comes into play with some of these newer options.
Great. And yeah, for sure. And that risk management piece is also something that's definitely a key trend. So thinking about that, and thinking about also the aggressive targets and sustainability mandates that industry has, Ali, I want to ask you, how do we shift into executing on the objectives? Like, why is it such a problem? And what's your approach to solving that problem and starting to work towards those targets and mandates?
Oh, great question. So I have a couple of points to make. And I want to take everybody, give everybody insider information about how to work with a commercial real estate and the investment community. So I have the opportunity to work with largest pension fund in Canada, and climate adaptation and carbon reduction is the top priority. So the question we have is, so how much money requires to be invested in the climate change and the decarbonization effort to really move the needle to make sure we are achieving our target or maybe getting closer to the target? So the first comment I have is, if you look at the history of industrial revolution in human society, creativity and innovation was the main ingredient. And in all instances, the humanity was moving forward and looking forward to something instead of escaping from a doom and gloom days. So I think the first point, we have to adopt a more optimistic attitude towards solving climate change and understanding the power of collaboration and innovation, that finally we can come up with a solution as we are moving forward to our decarbonization. Secondly, I think we cannot rely on government to solve our problem for us. So I've been basically looking at the industry. So we need to have the private capital to be mobilized in the industry in order for us to achieve our target. And for that, so we should look at the decarbonization effort, not just from the lens of engineering and sustainability. We need to really understand the commercial aspect of real estate and the investment philosophy. And we need to look at decarbonization, how we create more value, how we help with the bottom line, and how we look at the other benefit of decarbonization, like risk mitigation, health and safety, and tenant engagement. So in order for the industry to move faster, we need to create a stronger business case and demonstrate the value of decarbonization. So we have about 500,000 commercial kind of properties across Canada, and almost 85% of the property needs to be decarbonizing by 2050. So if you assume like simple math, we need 400,000 properties to decarbonize. Only just I'm talking about the commercial, not the residential aspect. So it's a massive undertaking, and the amount of investment required needs to be like 10 times than the current investment. And the reason, the solution is how to energize the private investors to really understand the value and how you can bake decarbonization in your business case. So at TrioVest, we realized that sort of a disconnect between energy and sustainability professionals and the real estate professionals, and we trying to bridge the gap to create a very strong business case that any investment from our perspective at TrioVest is a sustainable investment, and how to create a business case around that.
Great. And I think that sort of ties back to what Mariga mentioned in the first place, in his first comment about, getting tenants engaged and giving back, some benefits to them. And so I want to bring it back to you, Mariga, since Wood Green does have a few successful innovative pilots under their belt. So I was wondering if you'd be able to share a couple of examples of innovation adoption in Wood Green assets. Some of those more exciting pieces that, we're sort of progressing towards rather than running away from the big scary thing.
So some of the things, yeah. So again, very excited, to be honest. One of the big excitements for us was being able to be a demonstration project in the country. If you invest in energy savings and you figure out a way through your, obviously, by preventative maintenance, making sure you have the right preventative maintenance, and that you have the right data collection systems, you can actually monetize and turn energy savings into a financial tool. So that was really, really big for us. The second thing for us that we've really tried to do as part of our success menu is to make sure that we leverage the financing that we're getting from the energy to also do a little bit of augmented investment in the quality of the building that our tenants live in, and in particular their rooms, their kitchens, their bathrooms. Those are the things that begin to help people to sort of get truly engaged in all the measures that you need them, and the tenant behavior that we need to be able to sustain the program that we're putting together here. Because like I said, our biggest challenge is to make sure that it's done within the context of an affordable housing. And those are the things that we're sort of taking into our next level for the decarbonization. I don't want to talk too much about the technology. All I want to say, as well as part of that success menu, is that we have got some very good partnerships with our engineering partners, fin projects. We've got our finance and development partners, efficiency capital. We've got our monitoring and preventative maintenance support through Sensor Suite, as well as our local tenant associations as well, helping along to create what we feel is how you renew affordable housing, turn it into a next generation, and at the same time do it with some degree of financial sustainability embedded too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. So we're as we talk a little bit about, you know, the things that can move things along, and you know, all of these things we can leverage to enable progress in this realm. I want to shift the conversation to looking forward a little bit. So Phil, when you're looking to implement decarbonization initiatives at Mattamy, which is of course very big, what do you need to see in terms of the up and coming solutions that you might want to implement?
So I would say, if you think solutions that exist today, technically speaking, we have technology or solutions that could build zero carbon or net storing carbon homes. Like it's been done. There's tons of examples, pilots, etc. But unfortunately, it's not reached a commercialization level that, you know, this whole panel and conversations talked about, where we are a production builder and we try to build thousands of homes. And so we are very mindful that we are in a housing crisis, but also a sustainability crisis. And so while we would love to take all the amazing solutions today and put them in our homes, we have to balance that decision making. And, you know, I look to my colleagues on this call, like Ali, who's doing this, but at a, let's call it a more sophisticated level with pension funds. We're trying to do this with average Canadian homeowners, right? And so this is not typically someone that looks at a cash flow balance for the next 25 years and does their energy efficiency and their amortization of assets. So we're trying to find solutions that are adoptable, but also can be brought to the broader ecosystem. And I think one of the root causes that's holding back some of these solutions is the historical value equation of buying a home is fairly linear, where you have a home buyer who buys a home from a home builder, and that's the transaction that historically has existed. And quite honestly, if there's additional costs, that typically goes into the house base cost, and then prices go up, and that's not what we want to do here. And so we're trying to expand the conversation into a more of a system thinking approach, where we want more stakeholders participating in these interactions, because ultimately, decarbonizing our future homes is going to be beneficial for more than just the homeowner of that home. We would love for the opportunity for municipalities to use new homes as a strategy to minimize their retrofit challenge. They're looking at hundreds of thousands of homes that they need to retrofit. Well, we shouldn't be adding to that stock moving forward. We would love to work with our supply chain around the fact that they're going to be challenged to potentially provide new materials, or new trades have to install new materials. And how do we translate that into more of encouraging Canadian jobs in local economies? Like, how do we make more materials locally so we're not transporting materials from, you know, other parts of the country or internationally? Like, how can we change that narrative into a more of an economy equation locally? Or how do we get Canadians wanting these low carbon homes? How do we incentivize them? How do we drive them towards wanting, coming into, a Mattamy sales office and asking, what's my energy efficiency label, or what's my carbon index number? Like, these are the conversations that will really start to drive the momentum, because at the end of the day, it's going to take the broader industry to really implement these. Like, I can go and take any product and put it in the homes tomorrow. Like, that's not the challenge. The challenge is changing the industry that we exist in today. And really, like, we've been very open with our partners around, we're not here to compete on sustainability. Like, there is no place for us to be battling and having a competitive advantage on decarbonizing our homes. This is table stakes for everyone. This is like health and safety from 20, 30 years ago. Like, everybody needs to kind of be marching in the same direction on this. And so we really need to work together. And I think that mind shift will then enable a tremendous amount of movement on the solutions.
So many points touched on there, Phil. Thank you for sharing. So I want to ask Ali. There's actually a question that came into the audience from you, and we weren't going to take audience Q&A, but this is a really interesting one. So on your point about the value of decarbonization efforts, like the health benefits and the preventative maintenance and adaptation, has the industry been able to successfully quantify this added benefit to use in the business case? And that kind of ties into what Phil was just talking about. Like, are we able to sort of challenge the industry to move in this direction and make that mindset change? And are we quantifying that in dollars? How can we kind of focus that and get everyone moving in that direction?
Great question. I think we don't have a standardized process in the industry. And but the way we are looking at it, in every project, in every deal, in every acquisition process we are including the ESG factors as well as the financial metrics. And we are trying to correlate the cap rate, the return on investment, the net operating income, all the key financial performance indicators to our sustainability assessment and activities. So if you look at the way we're basically looking at it, so we all understand, in order to implement decarbonization and decarbonize our portfolio, we need to change the way we are looking at the retrofit from the engineering perspective. And I think if you want to be successful to correlate the value of decarbonization to the actual financial performance, you need to change the way you are going through your underwriting process, and you're going to need to make a commitment to change the way you appraise your properties, and understanding there is some correlation. It is not straightforward. It's jurisdictional by jurisdictional. It is a deal by deal, property by property basis. But definitely, if you look at the life cycle assessment of the property, you can make a correlation of decarbonization effort with the operating cost and the net operating income, and the schedule of your capital deployment. And you can correlate at the end of the day to the net present value of your projects. So we have done it on a couple of projects, and it's been really successful. And given the fact we're working with the pension funds and investment bankers, so we've sold the idea and the process and methodology, the formula we have created to include that in every decision making and every assessment.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I know it wasn't one of the questions we had planned to ask, but I think it was valuable to kind of tie that in there. So thanks for that. And I want to wrap things up here with Jolene. So we've talked a lot about, different types of action, ways that we can sort of start to incorporate this. But I want to ask you what's kind of exciting. What do you see as something up and coming that is high potential and exciting as a development in this space, just in our last 2 minutes here?
I'm gonna piggyback off of a couple of things that Ali actually mentioned both earlier and in the previous answer. The value of collaboration and thinking about how we build buildings and how we function within buildings a little bit differently, because that allows us to create value around some of these traditionally unquantifiable things like the health and safety benefits of the different occupants, and then carbon being one of those things as well. I think the other piece is just, restructuring how we kind of work together in that conversation and building better community to work together to solve the problem instead of spending our time kind of pointing fingers at who should be doing what and how we do that differently. It's part of the excitement of all of these new technologies and new options.
Great. Thank you.
Ria, I have a quick comment for everybody. So I encourage everybody to shift their focus from crisis to opportunity. When we talk about crisis in our industry, we are automatically pushing people to be on a survival mode, and that shuts off the creativity. This is a once-in-a-life opportunity for everybody in the industry, in the built environment, to tap into creativity, innovation, work with MaRS or other organization to come up with a solution that created real value for built environments. So I just wanted to share that idea with everybody.
And that is, thank you for sharing that. That is a fantastic call to action, and I think the perfect place to end. So thank you, Ali, thank you, Jolene, Mariga, and Phil so much for joining us. This has been really valuable. I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Yep, bye.
I'll now pass it back over to Andy, our MC for the event, to share some final announcements and closing remarks. Andy, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ria. And just echoing Ria, thanks to all the panelists. It's always nice to get a full download of your perspectives as some of Canada's biggest and I'd say most sustainably minded real estate players. Easily could have gone for another hour, but yeah, unfortunately we have to wrap up. So I'll just spend the last 5 minutes to talk about next steps and how folks can get engaged. So on screen here is a high-level overview of our timeline for year one of the mission. After today's launch of both the mission and the accelerator, we're going to be spending the summer months undergoing our evaluation selection process. So Ria talked about our adoption accelerator, where we want to pick a cohort of 6 ventures. Applications open today, and over the next few months, we'll be going through the due diligence process to pick the final 6 companies. Beyond that, it's still going to be quite a busy summer. We'll also be kicking off a coalition to help shape and guide our work. So the coalition will be an opportunity for peers to connect and learn, and broadly will help us understand the major challenges and issues facing the sector right now, many of which have been brought up in both the Lakeside chat and the panel. But then also, more importantly, working with the ecosystem to come up with new projects to address those challenges and barriers. So if you have an interesting idea, or just want to collaborate in general or want to join the coalition, let us know. As we are also looking to build new partnerships within the space and launch new projects. So over the next few months, we want to keep having conversations with many of you actually who are on the call today to see how you are tackling decarbonization within the real estate space right now, and whether there are things that we can collab on or future mission projects. So if you have any ideas, hit us up. So I talked about the selection process. That's going to wrap up in November. And by then is when the adoption accelerator technically kicks off. It being an adoption accelerator, one of the biggest value adds that we hope to provide to the companies is support with commercialization and adoption. So a big part of that is going to be us matchmaking and connecting these companies to a lot of the different real estate players, whether they're developers, owners, operators, construction companies, pretty much anyone relevant, and could be end users. So we want to kick off that work in November. And as well, we will be announcing the venture cohort to the world in December. We're going to be doing that formally at our annual Climate Impact Conference. So if you're there, you'll see it. If not, you'll see a release about the companies. And then going into year two, we're going to keep continuing this work, and we're hopefully going to start supporting the deployment of some of these technologies that we've been talking about and the companies that we'll be supporting through the accelerator. So through that, hopefully we can share our learnings, some key case studies, and ways that you guys can also support and get involved. So last slide for me, but here are some ways that you can participate. I think for the startups in the room, it's a bit more straightforward since you can apply for the accelerator. But for everyone else, here are a few ways that you can consider. So firstly, it's partnering with our ventures. If you're in the industry, your owner, operator, pretty much anyone that has anything to do with a building at any point of its life, then there could be an opportunity for you to work with our ventures in some way. MaRS is working with already dozens of relevant innovators within this building and prop tech and real estate space that will not only help you achieve your climate targets, but also help you save money and all the other key benefits that Ali and folks touched on. Let us know if you want to be part of this network. We're working with a bunch of different adopters right now who could be future customers. And there are also other ways that you can work with our ventures as well, whether it's through supporting with funding and being an investor or other opportunities. So if you do want to get in touch and learn more about the types of startups that are out there, hit us up. And also partnering with MaRS directly. So if anything that we talked about today resonated with you and your organization want to get involved in some way, let us know. Our MaRS team over the next 5 years is heavily focused on this work and would love to partner up with others who have similar objectives and goals. So if you have an interesting idea or just want to chat, co-host an event, or just be at the table as MaRS convenes industry stakeholders on these topics, shoot us an email. An example actually of a cool future project that we're cooking up right now that I can tease is a project around geothermal. So MaRS is going to be looking to convene a bunch of stakeholders to create a roadmap around how we can develop network geothermal in Canada to help decarbonize entire communities and get them off things like gas. We've seen one network geothermal project in Canada completed by Mattamy Homes and Enwave that has had positive results so far, but we need more of this and faster. I mentioned the coalition on the last slide. We're going to be kicking that off hopefully early fall or late summer. This coalition is going to help us figure out how we can achieve a lot of what we talked about and decarbonizing the built environment and other climate and economic goals. We're looking to recruit a group probably of around 30 or so organizations that can include the industry stakeholders, but also everyone else. So we want government at the table. We want capital providers at the table, policy experts, and other experts. We'll need to be a bit selective to make sure that we get the right mix of folks, but would still love to hear from you if you're interested. We're going to be convening the group about twice a quarter, mostly virtual, so not a super big lift. And we are also looking for a co-chair who is interested in all of the things that we've talked about. So if that's you, then let us know. And finally, supporting the mission. If you're interested in supporting Mission from MaRS as a donor or sponsor, we would love that. Mission from MaRS is only able to do what we do thanks to our philanthropic donors, which right now for this mission includes the Peter Gilgan Foundation. But we've had other great partners supporting our other work, including RBC Foundation, Consicon Foundation, Trottier, Thistledown, the Grantham Foundation. If climate is an area of interest to you, also let us know. To get in touch, you can email us at mfm@marsdd.com, which is now in the chat. Great. So that's it from us. Thank you all for joining today. We kindly ask that you spend 1 minute to complete our feedback survey. your feedback would be helpful for us as we do more of these and continue to engage with you. Thank you for joining today. And we look forward to being on this journey with all of you. And thanks to all of our speakers and panelists as well. We appreciate the insights.